Welcome to the new episode of All That Jazz. I'm your host, Matyash, and welcome to my podcast or my show, Atherton Drenth. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I was saying just earlier that I admire your big collection of books. I wish I could have something like that. Maybe someday I'll have a big collection.
Yes, I love my books, and they're very important to me. And it's a love that has been passed down to us from our father. So
Yeah. And you're an author and you're a spiritual healer, and you wrote Intuitive Dance and Following Body Wisdom. And I
yes,
looked up the covers of the books, and I love the Following Body Wisdom has a very simple cover. I usually don't comment on the book covers, but I just want to say Following Body Wisdom has like a looks like a picture of nature or maybe
yes,
a tree or a small plant, but
yes.
the shadow, like, I don't know, I just love it. I just want to say that.
It was a picture taken by a very dear friend of mine and a business advisor, Bruce Walton, and he does beautiful photographs,
Yep.
and he sells them online.
Okay, I see. Let me see. This is okay. Yeah, Zoom does this once in a while. It readjusts because it wants to see more of my face. I think that's what it is. All right. So how did you get originally into spiritual healing?
Well, it came as a result of a near-death experience that
Oh
I had
wow.
20 years ago. It was something that, if somebody had told me even 25 years ago that I would end up doing this um, with my life, I would have laughed. I mean, I knew I was intuitive. My parents were both highly intuitive, and they always encouraged that intuitive ability in me. So I was very fortunate that way. But I had suffered from poor health for the majority of my adult life and collapsed at work one day. And when I came to, I ended up being in bed for 6 weeks. And one day I woke up to find an angel standing beside my bed, and she said, "Atherton, it's your choice. You can live or you can die." And at first I was just so relieved that I had a chance to check out, and I just said, "Take me, I'm done." I just couldn't do it anymore. I was so tired of fighting and trying. I was falling through the cracks of the medical system for 30 years, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I felt myself rising
Sorry,
up.
sorry. What do you mean you were falling through the cracks? Like, what was happening?
I had all these symptoms that didn't make any sense. So I'd seen all manner of doctors. I'd had all manner of tests taken. Uh, the usual result was, it's all in my head. You're making it all up. You need antidepressants. Uh, we have to do an exploratory whatever, and it just didn't make sense to me. It didn't feel right. So I just kept looking. I just kept searching. And somehow through all of that, I still managed to get married and have two beautiful kids and uh, had a corporate career. I was working 50 hours a week and collapsing on the weekends with fatigue. So it was just an ongoing vicious cycle. So, anyways, when I said to take me, I could feel myself rising up out of my body, and it was just so sublime. And it was like I got halfway up to the ceiling when all of a sudden I realized I was leaving my husband at home to raise two teenagers on his own, and I couldn't do that because he traveled all the time. So I just sort of paused and I said, "Can I change my mind, please?" And it was like I heard this cosmic chuckle. And the next thing I knew, I woke up the next morning and all of a sudden I could sit up again. Up to this point, I was not able to stay up for more than 5 minutes. I wasn't able to walk more than 3 feet without collapsing. And suddenly I was able to get up and move around. I ended up having to drive myself to see this practitioner that a friend of mine had been trying in vain for months to get me to see. But he did this thing called energy work, and I'd never heard of it before. And because I was a former lab tech and I was fairly scientific in how I looked at things, there was very little information about what energy work was. I mean, the internet um, wasn't that uh,
Developed.
Yeah, with that developed, that available 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, 20 years ago, right? It was in
So
its infancy. Yeah.
yes, I had no idea what energy work was. And then that next morning I realized that I had to take that drive. I had to drive for 4 hours to get to see this young man. I don't know how I got there. I, it was just all a blur. And when I got there and I walked into his office, I was absolutely horrified with what I was seeing, because he had this very large waiting room, and you sat in this open waiting room looking at him practicing on other practitioners, on other clients. And he was basically just waving his hands over people's bodies. And I thought, I can't believe that I spent 4 hours driving to see this kid who looked like he was all of 16 wave his hands over people's bodies, and he was supposed to help me. And I got up and I was getting ready to leave when all of a sudden I heard this voice boom say, stay. And I was just like, okay. So I just sat down. And when I sat down and I was waiting for my turn, the front door opened, and there was an elderly woman and an older gentleman carrying this woman into the waiting room. And she was about my age, mid 40s. And they put her on a chair in front of me, and they lifted her leg up onto another chair, and it was all wrapped up in a white bandage. And they started to unwrap her leg, and her leg was at least 3 times larger than her other leg. And when they unwrapped it, it was pitch black.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I'd worked in the, I had worked as a lab tech for 12 years. I worked in hospitals and private labs, and I knew gangrene when I saw it.
Mm.
And I looked at that leg and I was horrified that that they had brought her to see this kid who did this hand wavy thing. So I looked at her and I said, shouldn't you be in a hospital? And she said she'd just been discharged from a hospital. She said, we're American. And she said, they don't know what's wrong with my leg. They want to amputate, but amputating my leg means that my husband and my elderly mother have to sell their homes in order to afford the surgery. I will lose my job. My husband will lose his job. And she said, we can't afford it. He's our last chance. And I thought, good luck, lady, just good luck. So then it was my time to get up on a table. And he did his little hand wavy thing. And I didn't tell him everything. I just told him that I suffered from migraines and I was tired all the time.
Wait, what happened to
And
the lady? Did she get well?
that's,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
going to tell you about
All
that.
right.
This is all part of the story. This, as far as I was concerned, this was God showing me how this works.
Yeah.
So he did his little hand wavy thing, and I sat up and I said, okay, what's wrong with me? And he says, you have celiacs. And I was floored, because up to that point, celiac disease is only diagnosed in children under the age of 4. It was unheard of in adults 20 years ago. So I ended up going into for a biopsy 3 days later, and it was confirmed that I had celiac. So I finally had my answer.
What is celiac, by the way? I
So,
don't even know.
okay, I'm sorry. Celiac disease is a severe allergy to glutens.
Oh.
And what happens is there is a part of the bowel called the duodenum, and it should have little fingers on it like this. When they did my biopsy, it was smooth as the back of my hand. There was nothing there. That meant I was not absorbing any nutrients at all. So the specialist told me, said it was the worst undiagnosed case of celiac disease that he had ever seen in his 15 years of practice. He said how I was even alive was a miracle. So he said, you have to go on this special diet. That's fine, no problem. But he said it'll be at least 2 years before you can go back to work, because I was 98 pounds and I was very weak. So I decided that I needed to go back to see this young man who did the hand wavy thing. And I ended up going down every other week, and I would stay for 2 days in a hotel, and he would do 10 sessions. And he had me back at work in 3 months.
Wow.
Every time I went back every other week for my 2 days of healing work, that door would open, and that man and that elderly woman would bring this woman in. And over the next 3 months, I watched that woman's leg go from black to green to blue to pink to the day she walked in perfectly healed.
Wow.
That's how powerful this work was. And this is how powerful this young man is. His name is Larry Steele. And then one day out of the blue, he just said to me, he said, "You're really intuitive." And I just kind of thought, well, how do you know that? And he said, "You could do what I do." And I remember looking at him and thinking, "Are you nuts?" And I remember driving home and saying to my husband, "So Larry thinks that he can heal me to do this." And my husband, who's a very, very practical man, said, "Is he nuts?" And I said, "Yeah, I think he is." But I said, I thought about it for about a month or two. And I thought, I'm going to go and take the course because I'm curious. I want to know how this works. I want to know how he knew. So I went down and took the course. It took a year. And, Matt, at the end of the first day, I knew I was supposed to be there. I knew that this is what I was supposed to be doing. I knew that I had to finish this training. Like, it was just so crystal clear. So I did the training with him. It took a year to get certified. I started seeing people at the house as volunteers. I didn't even have a massage table to work on. I was laying them down on my dining room table on top of a blanket. And I realized that I could do something with this. And I left a very high-paying corporate job and opened up my own practice. And I had a full-time practice in 3 months. So it was pretty miraculous.
Wow. In 3 months of after you finish certification, you were working full time as a healer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So Larry Steele, I know I've heard of Larry Steele, and I think I've had a session or two, maybe like through online stuff, but I know him because of the Voyage to Betterment documentary that you were also featured in, that my friend Andrew Faka made. And that was an amazing documentary as well. And I think one of the highlights of the documentary, besides um, the intuitive person that read what people were having problems with, just to the name.
Oh, yes, Laurie Wilson. Yes.
Yes, and but you, I think it was Ben, and he was severely heartbroken, I think, through his divorce, and it was an ugly divorce, and you did something with him, and you could see his chest kind of moving, like twitching as you were working on him, and it was quite a moment. So I do recommend anybody. I think you can watch it online for $5 if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you
On
can.
Yeah, but that was really amazing, and apparently now Ben is married, I heard. So that's amazing. He did. Did you have any sessions after the documentary with him?
No, I didn't. No, I
Okay.
never saw him. I never saw him. I didn't see him again until the documentary was released, and I saw him at the at the launch. So,
Right. That's amazing. So what's the technique called that Larry Steele does?
Larry does a technique that's called BOSS, which stands for Bio Operating Computer System, and it works with the analogy that the body is like a computer. And as you know, with a computer, when all of the programs are clean, they download very exactly, and the computer knows exactly what to do and where to find the files. But if a file becomes corrupted, then the computer struggles to find where that file is. So what BOSS does is it goes in and it finds out where the corruption is in the file. It pulls it out and corrects it, and then puts the right file back where it belongs, so that the computer, or the body computer, can start to operate the way it wants to. Because the human body is really meant to run on optimum. And it's when these files get corrupted or misconstrued, or they get put out of place, that the body starts to struggle with its health. So really, as healers, what we're doing is we are listening to the body, and we are listening to body wisdom, and we are having the body show us what is out of place. And then the body will dictate to us what it is that needs to happen in order to correct that imbalance.
I wonder
Yeah.
why it's not so widely known in public, that like the example you cited of that woman, that if she didn't go to Larry, she would have her leg amputated, and that would cost her a lot more money than going to see
Yeah.
Larry for 3 months. So
Yes.
wow, even though
Yeah.
she's coming from the States, I think it still costs her less probably than having her leg amputated. And obviously the downside of then living with just one leg, I mean the cost of that would be you can't measure that in money. So
Yeah,
that's
you can't.
um, okay. I want to first go back to why do you think you had a choice? So this is interesting to me because I've not really heard that before. Usually a near death experience is like, oh, you have to go back, and they're like, no, 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 I don't want to go back. But in your case, you were given a choice. Do you know? Do you get a sense of why that was?
Well, I'll give you the background on why that happened. So my background as a result of the my mother, who was a student of Theosophy. Theosophy will teach that every soul has at least 3 or 4 opportunities in every lifetime in order to check out. So if things aren't lining up in their soul path timeline on the things that they want to learn, they have opportunities to check out. My mother had a near-death experience when she gave birth to my older sister. In that particular instance, my mother was forced to come back, but she was given 5 things that they told her would happen to her to give her the strength and the courage to stay in this lifetime, because it was not an easy life for her. And when she shared that with me, I knew that 3 of those 5 things had come true, but she never told me what the last 2 were. And I know that for my mother, she said that her body never felt the same to her. She always felt like she was in a wetsuit that was 3 sizes too small for her. And my mother was on a perpetual diet for the rest of her life after that, just so that she could feel like she could fit inside her body. I know that for me, I had had several incidences prior to my near-death experience where I was given, where I could have checked out. I have no memory of it. I only know that those were my checkout points later in life. But this time I was given a choice, and I can't tell you why. They didn't explain that to me. I wasn't over there long enough to know why. I just know that my mother never feared death, and I have never feared death as a result of her experience. And I can say to you in all confidence that I still have no fear of death. Um, I know that when I'm working with clients and they're and I'm working with a loved one that has crossed over, and I'm talking to that person, I remember how beautiful it was over there. And sometimes it gets really hard to come back, but they always stand at the gate. Sorry, I'm going to get emotional. They always stand at the gate and they say, no, you chose to stay, you have to stay. So now I stay. So
Hmm. Did you have the because the classically they say there's a tunnel and you go through the tunnel to the heavenly realm. Did you have that experience?
no, it was just suddenly like walking into the light. It was like somebody had turned on a very bright light, and I was blinded by the light. But it was blissful. It was just there's this feeling of sublime love and peace and harmony that's just, you can't explain it to people. It's just such a beautiful moment.
Did you have any sort of sense that first you went out of body, or was it just directly like from where you were directly into the heavenly realm?
I felt myself lifting up. I could feel myself floating, and I was floating in the room, and I was aware of the fact that I was getting ready to go up through the ceiling.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's quite an experience. I think I'd love to have more people that had the near death experience. I think I had a couple already, but that's just fascinating to me because then you have, like you said, no fear of death at all, and you're just like, because you know for certain what happens. You just go back to where it was, and it's nicer than here, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So you've done more training after Boss. You've done some more trainings for your healing journey, right?
Yes, I have. So I've also been trained in something called TBM, which is total body modification,
Hmm.
which is very similar to BOSS. Actually, the chiropractor who developed TBM was close personal friends with the chiropractor who developed BOSS. So the two systems are very, very similar. They work very well. They harmonize very well. Then I trained in as a medical intuitive, regression, and I trained in Bodytalk, which is
Oh
also
wow.
another very, very powerful modality. And that's been developed by a gentleman, a doctor down in the
Australia.
States. Yeah, in Australia. Yeah, he's an Australian now living in Florida.
Right.
Then through that work, I've also taken courses on channeling. I've done angel therapy practitioning work with Doreen Virtue. I've self-taught on chakra work. I work with angels in the room, so I do a blending of modalities rather than moving from one to the other. It just all seems to marry into each other. I've also been trained in Therapeutic Touch, which is also a very popular healing modality
Wow.
and very widely accepted by most hospitals in North America.
Really?
Yeah, it is. There are a lot of nurses who practice Therapeutic Touch in hospitals in North America.
Well, okay. Can you explain what it is? Are you using like your chi energy to send, or your prana energy, whatever you call it, to send healing to the patient?
Well, with therapeutic, so different modalities do it in different ways. So Reiki, for example, puts energy into the field, but I'm not trained in Reiki.
Hmm.
The Therapeutic Touch does what's called unruffling. It smooths out the energy field. Whereas modalities like BOSS, TBM, and Bodytalk, they go in and they find out where the imbalance is, and then they remove the item that is causing the imbalance so the body can heal itself.
Well, which one do you think? Okay, I guess I'm putting you on the spot to comparing different modalities, but
Yeah.
what would you say? Do you think a modality like Body Talk or Boss or TBS are more powerful than Reiki, or does it depend on the practitioner?
It depends on what the body needs. So we're moving into what I would call a different medical healing model. Okay.
Hmm.
So I call them, and I talk about this in the following Body Wisdom. So you have your patriarchal healing model, which is where the doctor is the center of the wheel. So if you think of a wagon wheel, uh, the the uh, the doctor, the medical system is the authority, and it tells you who you need to see in order to get your health and well-being back on track so the wheel can move forward.
Hmm.
Okay. When you move into alternative healthcare or integrative healthcare, you're moving into what we call a matriarchal healing model, in my mind, which means that now you are the center of the wheel and you decide who you're going to access. We know whether it's going to be a chiropractor, an osteopath, a dentist, a doctor, a Reiki practitioner, or an energy healer. And as you trust your own body wisdom, your own intuition on who you need to see, then that will help you towards wellness. So all of these modalities are incredibly powerful in and of themselves. But for people who are accessing it, it's a matter of finding the right practitioner for them. Okay, so it doesn't matter what modalities they're practicing, it matters, do they have a good fit with the practitioner, and is this practitioner really helping them? How would people know that? You always know within 3 to 4 sessions if whoever you're seeing is helping you. If you're not seeing any improvement in 3 or 4 sessions, this is not the right person for you. It doesn't mean they're not good at what they do. It's just not the right energetic fit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
How is it that despite all these the work like Voyage to Betterment and a lot of work that's done, a lot of traditional medicine or the mainstream is very resistant to seeing any benefit to things like body talk, especially, and things, boss in the mainstream, virtually unknown, and sometimes they call it these skeptic websites, they call it pseudoscience, and all of these things don't work, and they call any alternative stuff quacks, even acupuncture after all these years still.
Yeah.
So how do you counter that? Do you need to do more studies? I personally feel we need to do more, like maybe documentaries on these type of things. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, science is based on being able to validate what you see. And
Mm.
there isn't enough material out there that they can see, that they can dissect. So therefore, because they can't see it and they can't validate it, therefore it does not exist. Therefore it is quackery. Okay. So what I say to people is that science is still growing. Science is not an exact science. You can even talk to a scientist or a doctor and you can ask them, are you sure? Are you definite? And they'll say, well, no. But so far, science will tell us that X, Y, and Z will work. So then I will say to people who are particularly pressing, back in the 50s, DDT was supposed to be perfectly healthy. You know, they even told people they could drink it and it wasn't going to harm them.
What's DDT? Sorry, I'm ignorant.
So DDT is a pesticide that was
Okay.
used in order to kill insects, and it was used on crops.
Right.
I was born in the mid 50s, and I can remember even in the early 60s of being encouraged to run through the DDT mists at campgrounds. They would spray us down so we wouldn't get mosquito bites.
Oh my God. And then they
So,
found out it's bad.
and it was one of the first things that was brought up by Rachel Carson in the Silent Spring about the damage that it was doing to the environment, you know?
Right.
And she suffered horribly based on her research. Uh, my mother was encouraged to smoke during her pregnancy with all of her children to keep the baby small so she wouldn't die again, you know? So, you know, this is where science grows up. So when scientists say, oh, well, this is just a bunch of quackery and it doesn't really work, well, the proof is in the pudding, you know? And that's why people who finally have the courage to try energy work and it works for them, then they, you know, like as one corporate CEO said to me, he said, you know, young lady, he says, I don't care what it is that you do or how you do it or what people say. All I know is that what you have done for me has worked, and that's all the proof I need. And when it comes down to energy work, it is the individual, you know. Um, People will say, well, the aura doesn't really exist. You know, we make this all up. Well, the Russians have done tremendous amount of research around this, and they started doing it way back in the 20s and the 30s. And they have actually developed a machine called the gas distribution visualization machine, uh, and it's being studied in 20 different countries. They've certified it as a medical instrument in Russia, and they use it to study the energy field around people and figuring out why they're getting sick or how they're getting sick.
So
We know,
this is like 100 years ago.
yeah. I mean, we know the aura exists because we can take pictures of it. We know that if the energy field has an imbalance, it can create problems physically, mentally, and emotionally. We know that if we go in and correct those balances, the body will heal itself. I mean, when you cut your finger, you don't have to tell your body how to fix it. Your body
Right.
knows what to do. So the energy field is no different. If it's got a cut in it, you just repair the cut and the body knows what to do.
Uh-oh.
You just have to learn to trust it. And the other main thing about this, Matt, is nobody has figured out how to make big money on this. Right?
Well, I think, you know, you obviously you can make a living, but it's not like a surgery type. And but there obviously there's some things that the medical community is great, like surgery. If somebody cuts your finger off, then alternative practitioners might not be so beneficial at that point in time.
Exactly. And everybody has their place. We need medicine, we need doctors, we need antibiotics. And if you break your leg, you're not going to go to a healer and say, heal it. You're going to go to a surgeon and you're going to get your leg fixed. So this is where you have to be practical. And this is where you have to be intelligent about what you're choosing to do. Okay.
Mm.
Um, there are, yes, there are miraculous stories there of people who have, healed themselves of cancer or horrible autoimmune disorders. And that's wonderful. And
Mhm.
and you are capable of doing that, but not everybody has that strength of belief. So then by all means, see who you need to see in order to get help.
Yeah, you know, I'm a big believer in sports rehabilitation insofar that let's say there's a high profile athlete that breaks his arm, and instead of recovering, recovery time is like I think 4 months or something. Instead of taking 4 months or 5 months, he does Bodytalk, or he does theta healing, or that he does one of these, and then it takes him like and then in 3 weeks the doctors clear him and he's like, you're ready to go. People would be like, wait, what happened here? I think you need, I think there's a philosopher, Eric Crawford, said history is made by examples. because somebody starts it. So if one team start to use some alternative practitioner and then it works, then others are gonna jump on the bandwagon. It's kind of like a group think, because
Yeah.
everybody is like, oh, this works, so we're gonna stick to this. But then somebody goes somebody else to somebody else that has different ideas, but those ideas work, then others will start to copy it. I think that's what's gonna happen eventually.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is already happening, but people aren't talking about it. There are, there are hospitals that are starting to explore the different facets of energy work. Um, I think it's Duke University down in the States that even has a wing where they study it. So it is out there. There just isn't enough research to validate it yet. Quantum physics has gone a long way to giving us a lot of validity, but we do have a long way to go. A long way to go. I think the other thing is we have to build. So professions have. How would I put it? If you say the word doctor, you know exactly what to expect.
Right.
If you say the word energy worker, people go, excuse me? They don't know what to expect. There isn't, how would you say it?
There isn't a classic archetype with
Yeah.
energy work, because it could be somebody that looks very woo woo and has a Wicca practice, and you're like, oh, I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
broad range of people, so you're like, what am I getting into?
Yeah. We don't have the professional reputation yet in order to validate our existence. So people are still skeptical. And that's a good thing, because there are a lot of practitioners out there who, are a little sketchy. But there are a lot of practitioners out there who are very professional. They come from very strong medical backgrounds that are helping to increase the professional face of what it is that we do.
How would you know if somebody, like, this is a practical question, if somebody goes to alternative guy or gal, and how would you know if somebody's sketchy? Beside the rule you made, which is good, that 3 sessions, and if you see no results, try something else.
And this is going to come across as being incredibly judgmental, but I've worked in the medical community, and I've worked in corporate, and I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and I can tell you that first minute of face to face is going to make or break you. And if you come to the door and your hair's all disheveled and you've got the talons and you've got the 3,000 amulets around your neck, and you walk in and you've got the music and the tie-dye and the ambulance and the crystals all over the place and the dog barking in the background, I'm going to have a tough time wanting to get up on the table. Okay. You are more likely to trust somebody in a profession that you know nothing about if they are coming to the door and they look like a professional, they act like a professional, they treat you like you are a professional, and they are obviously take their profession with integrity. They're treating your confidentiality with integrity. Is a totally different ballgame. So your appearance is everything. Your practice room is everything. How you present yourself, what kind of documentation you have, even the forms that you have them fill out. It can make or break you.
Right, the small details like that. I really love that answer. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, if you are professional, you're gonna attract a lot more people, and of probably clients of a better caliber than if you're. And then word of mouth is gonna do, its own thing.
And yeah, and this is a word of mouth business. I have done precious little advertising. I didn't have a website for years. I just had a simple business card with my name and phone number on it. But my entire practice was built through word of mouth.
Yeah, and then it didn't hurt that you were in that documentary.
Well, I'd already been in practice for almost 7 years when I was in that documentary.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that experience, by the way, of doing the documentary?
That was very cool because it just came out of the blue. I owned a healing center in Guelph, Ontario at the time. And I got a phone call from Larry Steele, my teacher, and he said, Atherton, we have a gentleman coming into town to do some filming for a documentary. And we need a place. And we thought about the Paradigm Center, which was the name of my healing center. He said, do you think it would be all right if we came and did some filming? And I said, yeah, sure. The center had just happened to be closed that day. So I said, come on down. And so I went to the center and I got it all opened up. And that's how I met Andrew, and I met Ben, and I met all the other practitioners that came with him, and Matt, who was the cameraman, and Larry was there. And we just spent all day filming. And, Andrew was filming other sessions. Not everybody agreed to have that go into the documentary. I wasn't supposed to be on film. I wasn't supposed to be there. All I was supposed to do was open up the door, and I was sitting in the back having a cup of tea, talking to everybody, having a lovely time. And then Andrew pulled me into the room at the last minute, and he said, can we just give this a go and see what happens? And it's like, yeah, okay, sure. And the rest is, as they say, is history. I got to meet some lovely people on that day. We're still friends to this day, which is really wonderful. And I wasn't even supposed to be in the finished documentary. Andrew had called me a year later to say anything that they had filmed at the center, none of the participants would agree to having it released in the documentary because they were so shocked at what happened.
Wow.
And I said, that's fine. I mean, I had no expectations, so that was fine, whatever. And then Larry called me a year later, and he said they're releasing the video down in Windsor on Saturday. Do you want to come down with us to go and see it? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? Still had no idea I was in the documentary. And we were halfway to Windsor, which is like a 4-hour drive. And Larry said, so are you excited about seeing yourself on film? And I just went, excuse me? What do you mean I'm on film? Andrew told me I was not going to be in this. And he said, oh yeah, he said one of them finally agreed to allow it to be in the documentary.
Ben, yeah.
Yeah, Ben. So I had absolutely no idea. So I was just as incredulous as most people who are watching the video. So
yeah, I think it's quite this is a good point. I think most people would not want their session to be broadcast for everybody to see, even though obviously in Ben's example the results after were pretty remarkable, and seemed to be a causal relationship between your session and then him eventually getting his love life back on track. So that was amazing.
And that often happens in healing sessions, which is why they're very private and why we don't discuss them, because there are very, very personal things that happen, and very deep traumas that can be released. And I know that with one of the other sessions that was filmed during the documentary, it was a very, very dramatic healing that happened. And I completely understand why that person chose not to have it released, because it was incredibly personal and deeply private.
Right. But I'm thinking if it was released and they're done with it, or maybe they were not done with it. Sometimes a session leaves. Do you think? Because I have a theory that sometimes you release something, but there's still other aspects of that to be worked on. So you still have to. Because like obviously you're not gonna be. You don't go to a session and be enlightened. Obviously that's up to your work. It's a mental level, right? So there's I think Dr. Hawkins used to tell, my teacher used to say oftentimes, every illness is physical, mental, and spiritual.
Right.
So maybe if you work on something on mental, but there's still other stuff on maybe on the physical level or on the spiritual that you work on.
Yeah, I mean, not everything is healed right away. We're like an onion. Sometimes we have to peel back the layers, and we could end up, somebody could end up coming in saying, well, I have a sore elbow. Can we work on the elbow? No problem. And all of a sudden we end up working in the spiritual realm. And there's an emotional trauma that comes up that happened when they were 3. And they'll lay there and say, what on earth did, my falling off my tricycle when I was 3 have to do with my elbow when I'm 60? I have no idea. I'm just telling you that this is where the body is going. And this is what we need to do. And then we do it and they go, oh, gee, my elbow doesn't hurt anymore. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. which just adds to the woo-woo factor of what it is that we do, right? But everything is interconnected.
Right. Do you do any recommendations for people, like after a session? Do you say like, oh, you need to eat more of this, or you need to drink more water, or you need to meditate, or whatever, or if they're religious, you need to pray more, or I don't know, go to church more, or something like that?
I never tell people to go to church more. um, there will be things that will come up like, maybe you should go and see a chiropractor or see an osteopath. I mean, I know I'm good at what I do, but I'm not the be all and the end all. So I will refer out. I think that that's important for a practitioner to understand the scope of their abilities. There are some things I just can't help with, and they'll need to see a therapist. If there's been any form of trauma, especially emotional or sexual trauma, I like to be reassured that they are working with a therapist, because there can be flashbacks and they need a safe place to do that. And I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a psychologist. They need to be working with a trained therapist. And I do work in harmony with a lot of therapists, and they will send them to me. Okay, we're working with this particular thing, but we need you to work on the physical while we do the emotional. That's brilliant. This is all helping the client. Sometimes what will come up will be, they're very low in supplements. I'm not trained as a nutritionist, so I will make a few suggestions, but then suggest they work with a naturopath who is qualified to tell them what supplements. Water is always important. They're always told to drink at least 8 glasses of water after every session, because water helps the energy to move. Turn off your electronics at night. That's a big one.
like you mean before you go to bed, or like
Yeah,
half an hour before you go to bed or something?
yeah, an hour before you're getting ready for bed, step away from the TV, turn off your phone, take the computer out of your room. Electronics interferes with people's energy, so get
I'm
it out of the
horrible
room.
at that. What if I, on my Kindle, I have the option where you put turn off the blue light, so it's like a reddish. Like, does that
Yeah,
help at all? Do you
it
think?
helps some people. I know people that doing that has really helped them a great deal. So you have
Okay.
to figure out for yourself. Yeah.
As far as supplements, do you recommend like vitamins? I know a lot of people have deficient, especially in winter, especially in Canada where you are, vitamin D, because you're so inside for like what, 5, 6 months of the year.
Yeah. Well, vitamin D and K2, which helps the absorption of vitamin D, is really important. I'm a big believer in vitamin C, and we don't take nearly enough vitamin C. Uh, I know the naturopath that I work with, he's very much, you should be taking at least 2 to 3,000 international units of vitamin C a day.
Oh wow.
And if you're sick and fighting something off, you can go up as high as 10,000.
Yeah.
Um, Depending on menopausal women, what kind of calcium supplement are they on? That's very important to keep their bones strong. Um, what else do I recommend? Um, if they are having digestive disruptions, so for example, celiacs need to take B12 folic acid and multi-Bs. That's something that they have to take every day. And that's about as far as it goes. Anything
Yeah.
else, naturopath. Yeah.
What about do you have in your spiritual practice, do you practice meditation and stuff like that to help you with your healing?
So I do practice meditation. I'm not to any of the extent that some of the big meditation teachers do, like Jack Kornfield. I teach people, I give them information on how to do the vertical axis, which is a very effective grounding technique that helps take you into meditation. Doing 5 to 10 minutes of meditation every day always has long-term values. So I'm a big proponent of meditation, but I don't teach meditation. I leave that to others.
Right. You ever have like a client come in and you're like, boy, you might need some psychoanalysis or
Yeah, sometimes people come to you and they haven't really been open and forthcoming about their issues.
mm,
Um, I've had I've had 2 young people I've had to turn away because they had schizophrenia. I don't deal with schizophrenia.
Oh, wow. How
Um,
do you tell? How do you tell?
uh, it's just the energy goes all sideways in the room, you know, and you can tell that whatever you're saying to them, they're giving you the opposite answer. That's a hard one to explain. So I have to make that quite clear that I don't work with certain things. So I won't work with people who are bipolar. If you are manic depressive, you need to be under the care of a professional. I can't work with that. Um, Mild depression, it depends. If you're on medication, you know, then we'll talk. But if you're expecting me to heal you of depression, I can't make you any promises on that. So again, this is being very, very aware of the scope of my practice and where my abilities lie.
That's interesting. So you recommend that they first go to a professional to deal with their depression before they try alternative therapy.
Yes, just because it's safer that way, you know, you're sort of covering your bases because people, especially in the beginning, because they're so new to energy work, they really don't understand the scope of what it is that you can do and you can't do.
Yeah.
So are there certain things it's just safer for them to be under the care of a professional?
So do you think taking Zoloft or something like that would be beneficial for the short term so they get that under control and then start more deep work on themselves?
That's up to them and their practitioner. A lot of my clients are on antidepressants. They can still get energy work while they're on antidepressants. They just need to tell me that they're on them.
Okay. So the intuitive dance book, is that also about teaching people how to be more intuitive? Or is that
Yes.
a gift that you're born with?
Well, everybody's born intuitive.
Hmm.
And a lot of people are unaware that they are intuitive and it's causing them a lot of stress and anxiety in their life and they don't realize it. So the purpose of the intuitive dance was to help people to identify their intuitive abilities, to figure out what kind of an intuitive they were, and then to learn how to use that ability to reduce the stress and anxiety in their life.
Okay. So like me, for example, I'm not quite sure if I'm intuitive, but sometimes I think I am. Like I'm not. So your book then would help me to get clear, like ask clear tests. So about how would you? Okay, give me like a simple test for.
Okay.
Okay.
So first of all, I'll tell you what the 4 different types of intuition are.
Hmm.
Everybody has all 4, but one will be predominant over the others. So the first is, for example, is being clairvoyant, and that's clear seeing, and you're able to see things in your mind's eye. You're very visual. You can see images in your eye, in your mind. You can see colors. If people are describing a room to you, you can visualize it. So that's being clairvoyant.
Hmm.
So clairvoyance, their intuitive ability will come in flashes. There'll be a word or a picture or a feeling, and it'll all come from up in around the head. The next one is being claircognizant, which comes from the heart, and you just know things. You just have a hunch that this person isn't being straight with you, or this person isn't feeling happy. It's just men have a tendency to be highly claircognizant. You know, they just know that north is in that direction. You know, it's just that sort of thing.
I think I have some of that. Like sometimes about somebody, I'm just like, nah, there's some off. But I sometimes I don't know, and then sometimes I'm also wrong. So I'm like, then I'm like, I really don't know.
See, and that's the other thing. That's the misconception about intuition. People figure that if you're intuitive, you're going to be right all the time,
Mm,
and you're not. Okay, because it comes in flashes and it's very fast and it takes time. And I'm highly intuitive. Yes, I know I am, but I still make mistakes. So you just learn to take it in stride, okay? Because sometimes those mistakes are happy accidents and you had to make a mistake in order to learn something.
right.
So the third intuitive ability is clairaudience. It's clear hearing. Musicians, for example, have a tendency to be highly clairaudient. They can hear voices, so you never say that to the doctor because doctors don't like that. But you can hear music. I worked with a colleague years ago who was a very talented musician, and she could hear auras, and she could hear whether it was a B sharp or a B flat, and then she would know what was wrong with them based on the musical notes that she was hearing.
Wow.
And then the last is being clairsentient. And children are predominantly clairsentient in the beginning. Women are predominantly clairsentient, and clairsentient is clear feeling. And they just feel everybody's stuff. And that's where it gets really messy,
Oh my
because
gosh.
when they feel everything. They can feel their environment, they can feel other people's energy, they can feel pets, and when they feel this stuff, because they're not aware they're clairsentient, they think they've either caused it or they've created it or they need to fix it. And it just messes with their head, and it creates so much stress and anxiety. And I find that the young people who are coming into the planet now are so clairsentient. They're just so empathetic and so hypersensitive that, if they walk into a room and suddenly their elbow starts to hurt, they think, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. And then they find out the person they're talking to's got a sore elbow. And then they think, oh my God, I made them have a sore elbow. I don't know what to do. And I feel really sorry about it. And, and I have to make everybody happy. So they struggled the most.
Hmm. I think I may have some of that too, because right now I'm in a home where I grew up, so there's that, and then there's also a family member that I don't get too along with too well, and living in the same house. Yeah, that's not usually a recipe for feeling great, especially if you're kind of picking up some of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, so okay, so what can people do then if they're picking up stuff and they don't want to? They need to get more grounded, or need to meditate more, or what is it?
So if you are feeling, so what I say to people who are predominantly clairsentient, if you're feeling something, anything, if you're suddenly feeling happy or sad, or you get a toothache or a headache, the very first question you need to ask yourself, is this really mine, or does it belong to somebody else? If it's truly yours, you will know right off the bat. But if it isn't yours, you're going to go, well, I'm not really sure. The minute you say, I'm not really sure, it doesn't belong to you. So
Hmm.
you can detach from it. Oh, I am aware that someone has a sore elbow, therefore my elbow doesn't need to work anymore.
Right.
Okay. I don't need to attach to that. If a client walks into my room and they feel really, really sad, I am aware of sadness. But until they bring up sadness, I'm not going to try to make it any better. I'm not going to talk to them. Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm not going to ask those questions. I'm going to wait for them to talk, which goes into what I call intuitive ethics. And that's why I developed them. And intuitive ethics there's three basic steps to intuitive ethics. It is just because you know doesn't mean you do. Wait to be asked, and then only do as asked. So if that client comes in and they're feeling sad and I'm aware of it, I am not going to do anything until they bring it up. And if they say, yes, I feel sad, I'm going to ask, how do you want me to help? Am I working with sadness? And 98% of the time they'll say, no, I stubbed my toe. Can you work on my toe? You know?
Right.
And so then I haven't been asked. I don't do as asked. Okay. If I'm talking to a friend or one of my children and they call me up and they have a problem, and I will listen and I will say to them, even though I can hear all the solutions in my mind, are you asking me for help, or do you just need me to listen? 98% of the time they'll just say, no, I just want you to listen. And I will bite my tongue. And I tell you, there are days I'm surprised I still have a tongue in my mouth. But if they ask me, yes, I need help, I would say, you need help with what? Spell it out for me. And then my intuitive mind will have 10 different solutions. I will offer them three, A, B, or C. What do you think you should do? I always hand it back because they have free will and I don't want to interfere with their free will. And if they don't want me to do anything, then I just sit back and I bite my tongue and I just send them love. That's all I can do.
Right. That reminds me of a quote by Winston Churchill, to paraphrase, that he never got indigestion from eating his words. I, and I think he still said a lot of things maybe he shouldn't have, but still, that's a great quote.
Yeah, it is a great quote.
um, Wow. So this is quite comprehensive. I love your breakdown of what you can say and on the circumstances, and that you qualify, that you not only get permission, but a permission on a certain area. Exactly. That's really good. Because I remember I first got aware of this when I was in Toronto. I went to a hypnosis workshop, and this teacher, Georgina Cannon, was talking about how uh, this intuitive lady went to her, and she's like, "Oh, I see. There's somebody behind you. There's a like a angel or something." And Georgina was like, I didn't ask you to say that.
Yeah.
I didn't ask, you know." And I thought, wow, that's good, because otherwise people just go and try to change one another, like, oh, are you sad, you should do this and that. And people 99% out of 100, they will reject any kind of advice that's because it's not really advice when you don't ask for it. It's criticism, basically.
Well, and I mean, how many times have any of us been in a conversation with a loved one or a friend, and they're going through some horrible thing, and you're going, okay, well, have you tried this, or maybe you should do this, and well, if you just said this, maybe that would be okay. And that's you interfering because they didn't ask you for help. And that's when you get what we call in my teacher Larry, he calls it the yeah but syndrome. You just jump in there and say, well, did you try this, did you try that, or maybe if you could do this. And the person will say, well, yeah, but I can't do it this way, and yeah, but I can't do it that way. It's just like, that is your first sign they didn't ask you for advice, sweetheart. Back off. So
Yeah. And usually a lot of it is also people that are um people that give advice are usually like overly giving advice. They usually come from families that are very dysfunctional, and the way they when they were younger, they were taking care of their parents, and then they try to change everybody else, but they still have their own stuff. And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, they try to resolve that by changing somebody else. So anyway, if you qualify for Al-Anon, go to that. um okay, I want to talk a little bit about body talk, because I went to a few sessions of body talk, and I found it one time, like, usually I will have to say that usually I didn't see great results. Although one time, because I only went to like 3 or 4 sessions, but one time she worked on my something about the chi energy around the skin,
Hmm.
and she rebalanced that. And then after, I was slapping my hand, I was like, oh, it doesn't feel as it doesn't hurt as much. I was like, wow, this is so cool. So can you talk a little about body talk, what it is and what it is beneficial for?
Well, that's
That's a
really
big
broad.
question, actually. Okay.
That's a big question. uh Body talk is just one of those modalities that just hones in on where the imbalance is. And what I love about body talk, and Boss and TBM does this as well, is it sets up a cascade of healing. So we will, it's like lining up dominoes, because there may be more than one thing that's causing the problem. And what it does, especially in body talk, is it lines up the dominoes, and then you flick the first one and it just all ripples back into place. And energy work can be very subtle. You may not feel anything for a long time. You just may notice that you feel happier, calmer, more peaceful somehow. Or it can get really dramatic, like Ben, rippling on the table. Um, People can feel hot, they can feel cold, they can feel tingling, they can feel like their body's spitting things out. Or it can get really, really intense and they just need to cry. I've had a person sit up and just suddenly vomit, you know,
Wow.
because it was what she needed to get rid of was so intense. Thankfully, there was a pail nearby. Um, I've had sessions where people have just started to scream and scream and scream. So we have lots of pillows for them to do that, scream into. And it was just years and years and years of being put down, and she was just finally to release it all. And she, so those were very cathartic moments. They're rare, but they do happen. Uh, I know that for parents, when they're watching their children being worked on, sometimes they get worried because, the kid's starting to do this and they think, oh, is my child having a seizure? No, they're just releasing. You can get really, really super cold, which is just chi coming off the body.
Mm-hmm.
These are all very subtle indicators that the work is working for you. And then there are some people, you can work on them until the cows come home and nothing's going to happen.
Why is that? Why is it some people are so impervious to change?
They've come in thinking that this is never going to work. They've decided it isn't going to work. They don't want it to work. They're too deeply invested in their health problems. I worked with a woman years ago who was absolutely furious with me. She screamed at me because I fixed her leg after 10 years of not being able to walk.
What?
And it meant that she had to go back to work. She was going to lose her disability payments.
Oh man.
So these things happen. And it's good for people to be aware of that. How invested are they? There was another woman I worked with who really didn't want to get better because it was the only way she could get her husband to stay with her in the marriage.
Emotional manipulation, right?
Emotional manipulation, yeah. So, that sort of stuff happens.
What about stuff like ADD, ADHD? Can Bodytalk help with that?
Yep, it can. But you also have to change the child's diet because kids who are suffering from ADD and ADHD, their diets are atrocious. The sugar that those kids are consuming is absolutely unbelievable. So
it's usually sugar, related to sugar, you think?
I'm not going to say it's totally related to it, but it's a big piece of it. Okay.
Yeah.
There's also other things that are happening with kids who have learning disabilities. Chances are they've been either a suction or forceps delivery. It's been an emergency C-section and they've been pulled out too fast and in the wrong way. So then you have to bring things in like cranial sacral and chiropractic and osteopathy to help to balance that all out. So
let's talk about the other Following Body Wisdom, the one with the nice cover on. So what is that about, that book?
So Following Body Wisdom is about what energy work is and what it is not. And I give 5 or 6 case examples of how energy work worked for them, and they're very different cases. One was a young boy who had cancer of the brainstem. Another one was a woman who it's been a long time since I've looked at my book, so I have to remember.
That's all right.
Another one was a case of a woman who had very self-esteem problems. Another story was about a young girl who was passing out all the time and she had a huge sugar imbalance. So we had to balance that. It talks about the patriarchal healing wheel versus the matriarchal healing wheel, how to pick a practitioner, what to look for. It goes into a lot of details about the aura as well. So it's a good primer if you've never been exposed to energy work before and you want to know what it is, and if you want to see a practitioner.
Right, and I love that it has case studies, because I think those are sometimes the most interesting part of books, because you see how the patients got better and through your energy work. And now that you practice so many different modalities, do you find yourself blending all of that stuff into, like, will this person use this modality because you feel like it might work for them, and then for this person use another one?
No, because then my head's in the way. I'm not listening.
Oh.
Yeah. No, you never go into a healing session with preconceptions. My job is to make sure that I'm properly grounded, that I'm connected to the healing energy, that I have permission from the client to work with them, that I have permission from the person's body to work with them. And then my job is to listen and to provide what the body is looking for.
Okay, so only then like when you're with the patient, and then when you intuit and you speak to them about the problems, only then do you decide? Or sometimes the patient is like, oh, I want to have a body talk session, or I want to have the boss session.
Generally, my clients learn that they just come in and they do what's called an LBD, let the body direct, if they don't know what they need. Because once people have been doing this for a while, they know they need what we call a tune-up. So they'll just say, I need a tune-up, let's see what comes up. So then we just connect to the body, get permission, and I just say body direct, If they come in and they say that, I've got digestive problems and I have migraines and I have warts and I have skin problems, I will go to the body and I will just say to the body, do I have permission to work with you? Yes or no? Okay, are we working with the digestive issues? Are we working with headaches? Like, where's the priority? And the body will pick the priority. And sometimes the body will say, all of that means nothing, because we're going to go back to age 3 and we're going to talk about what happened with daddy.
So you usually use the body talk, because that sounds like a body talk protocol, getting permission and which area to work on. But then within that framework, can you still use another modality to work on that area that you
Yeah.
found? Oh,
Oh,
wow. That's
yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah. You just pull it in. Yeah.
Wow. That sounds okay. That's really cool. So if people want to do a session with you, how can they, what kind of stuff do you offer?
Well, then I would say I have them go to my website, athertondrenth.ca, read through everything. And if they want to have a session with me, then they would contact my assistant and she would set that up. I would just say to your viewers that I have a long waiting list. Uh,
So a
but I
sound of a good practitioner, long waiting list. That's really
yeah.
good.
But I do have a referral list of colleagues that I personally know, that I have personally worked with. And if they want to get in to see somebody sooner, then to go to my referral list on my website and to contact any of those practitioners, because they're all very highly qualified. They're very good at what they do. They're getting busy as well. So they would get a session sooner, I think.
So is the waiting list like 3 weeks or like 3 months?
And so I'm not, if I remember correctly, I told my assistant told me we're booking into September, October.
What?
Yeah.
It's even longer than 3 months. Now it's
Yeah.
February. Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite impressive. All right. Well, let me see. Anything we didn't cover yet so far? Or anything you'd like to add before we close this podcast?
Well, in my book, the intuitive dance, at the back of the book, there is something called the 3 simple things. And they are 3 techniques that can be practiced in less than 5 minutes a day that will dramatically reduce people's stress and anxiety. And I strongly encourage them, if they're interested in that book, The Intuitive Dance, to take a look at the back of the book. And what those 3 exercises are, is the first one is called the vertical axis, and it's a grounding technique that grounds you into both heaven and earth. And it's a very, very powerful grounding technique. Then the other one is cord cutting with the angels. So this is particularly important for clairsentience, because it cuts all that flack that they've picked up from people during the day. And then the third is dream time management. So many of us are beginning to wake up to the fact that we are connected. We are all connected like drops of water in the ocean. And we are busy during the day, but we are traveling out into the dream time and we're trying to fix things in the dream time. And we are all waking up exhausted.
Yeah.
So doing the 3 simple things will help people to stay more grounded, so they are much more clear about what is right for them and not right for them. It'll help them to not be so easily manipulated by other people's personal agendas. It'll help them to sleep better, meditate better, manage their diets more effectively. The dreamtime management will help them to wake up more rested in the morning. And then the cord cutting will help them to really cut down on all this energetic noise that they're picking up during the day. So,
Wow. I've never heard this, that you work on stuff during sleep. I think that makes sense during dreaming time, because sometimes I dream weird stuff and then I wake up and it's still like I could sleep a lot more, actually.
yeah, yeah. And that's usually the first sign that you've been working out in the dream time, is you're waking up exhausted.
Wow. So I need to ground myself more?
So you would ground yourself in the vertical axis. If people go to my website, athertondrenth.ca, they'll see that there's a sign up for a newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And if they sign up for my newsletter, then they will get a free audio version of the vertical axis. Then in the book, they will get the Dreamtime Management and the vertical axis. And there's a little, Dreamtime Management and cord cutting. And there's actually a little test that they can do at the back of the book, and they can test themselves over 40 days to see how improves their life. So
Yeah, that's always good because sometimes your mind discounts and you're like, oh, nothing's changed, but you're not really tracking, so you don't know what's going on.
yeah,
So that's always good to keep your, because the mind can be tricky and you can forget what you did and you're like, oh, I'm fine now.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
All
that's so
right.
true.
Well, Atherton, really a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you. It's been my honor, and it was lovely talking to you. And I've really enjoyed my time with you. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for listening and watching.
Bye bye.